Our next speaker has over a decade of cybersecurity experience, is responsible for delivery of threat hunting, incident response, and security operation at recon customers. As a former Air Force officer, Andrew has participated in national level operations and exercises and provided real-world emergency response to state-level cyber incidents. We're ready to learn? We're ready to learn on how to stay ahead of the curve. So please, please join me in giving him a warm welcome. Andrew? I got dry up there.
There it is. Awesome. What a venue. So, like she said, my name is Andrew Cook. I am the CTO of Recon InfoSec, and I am very excited today to be telling you a little bit about one of my passions, threat hunting. So by the end of this talk, I want you to share just a little sliver of my passion and beliefs around what threat hunting is, why it's important for you, why it's important for your organization, and why it's just important about how we think about cybersecurity. So I would not normally spend this much time talking about myself, but I do want to tell you a little bit about the background of threat hunting and where it came from. And my career has largely paralleled the birth of threat hunting through to today. So threat hunting emerged out of the military, out of the NSA. I'm going to rewind you back to about 2011, where a young Andrew's graduating commissioned, joining active duty, getting to his first unit as a Air Force cyberspace operations officer. Sorry, this echo, man. And I'm learning all the things. I'm learning intrusion detection systems, network intrusion detection systems, all the other things that you can do to monitor and find threats in your environment. And then I get to my first unit and they say, throw that all out. You, this little group of lieutenants and captains, you are responsible for coming up with a new approach to defensive cyber operations. We're throwing out the mission, you're going to start from scratch, and you're going to figure it out. What we want you to do is find the threats that everybody else missed. We're doing all of these things, we're doing all these things for decades. We want you to try something different. Your job, and this is what we started with, was we really liked metaphors and analogies, send cyber bullets downrange and come back with hackers. Ready, go, right? So what did we do? We developed an entire methodology that we called threat hunting, which was, well, I'll get to that in a second, around threat hunting. We developed the tools, we developed the employment model, we developed the certifications, and we developed where threat hunting fits into our paradigm of defensive cyber operations. We also developed and got approved and procured the nation's first defensive cyber weapons system called the CVAH. The H stands for hunt. So I get out of the Air Force having a very successful foray into what threat hunting is and defining it, and I'm excited to bring it out commercially. And what I find is, to my dismay, that my term that we had worked so hard to define and get codified into doctrine was being taken up by vendors and technologies that claim to do the threat hunting for you. And I'm like, guys, this isn't what threat hunting is, and you can find me right around there, about 10 years ago when that picture was taken, writing blog posts, ranting about threat hunting being subsumed by technology vendors, and they didn't get the point. So I'm out there in the commercial space, and as a Texas Air National Guardsman, continuing to beat the threat hunting drum on what it is. Commercially, we're delivering compromise assessments, which are these engagement-based threat hunts, rolling into environments and saying, hey, we're going to assume that there's a bad guy out there, we're going to try to do something different that you're not already doing, and we're going to find the ones you missed. And we found bad guys. As a Texas Air National Guardsman, this is also where I got a lot of my initial incident response experience, because again, going back a decade is where the Air National Guard was getting more and more involved in not just hurricane relief, but also cyber incident response. So I was rolling out to cities and counties doing incident response in all these little cities and counties that couldn't help themselves. They'd roll out the guard, and it would be me showing up in a uniform. A lot of consulting and other things along the route at early stage companies. I was at DHS. You might have heard, and I'm sure a lot of you have benefited from the DHS's programs around NCATs and RVA, right? The free pen test, the free vulnerability assessments. Those are legitimate programs. A lot of them are subcontracted out to awesome pen testing firms and awesome vulnerability assessment firms. We were one of them. What they wanted us to do in particular, though, was introduce threat hunting as a component of their pen testing program. So the idea is a city government, a municipality, a critical infrastructure, during their pen test from DHS, while we're out there finding vulnerabilities, exploiting them, could we introduce a threat hunting component where, hey, if we got in here, what are the bad guys already here? So we developed, again, an employment model for DHS to bring threat hunting, the same way I was doing in the Guard and the Air Force, to prototype a pilot, and I went out there to do one of these pen tests and combined it with threat hunting, right? And that now lives in DHS somewhere, gets moved around in bureaucracy, but you could probably still find it going somewhere. Today, I'm the CTO of Recon InfoSec. We do managed security operations. So this is all your SOC, SIEM, find and stop bad guys, MDR, 24/7 monitoring, detection, response. All these decade plus of experience around threat hunting and incident response is culminated in building a bad but team that is incorporating everything I've learned to find and stop bad guys every single day, incorporating all these things about threat hunting. And I want you to understand why threat hunting is important to what you're doing, even if you think it's not. So what is threat hunting? I've been using this term a lot. I define it as any proactive effort to find threats that are already inside your environment. Now, this is proactive. We've caught that. I think everybody's got the point of threat hunting now is proactive. But this is not just your regular monitoring, right? This is above and beyond your regular monitoring because you need to assume that your existing defenses have failed. So that's this threat-centric and assumed breach mindset, where you're constantly thinking about the threat, you're constantly thinking about where you've been bamboozled, where your existing technologies have failed, and that's going to motivate you to be proactive about threat hunting, and that's going to motivate you to do and build the things you need to threat hunt better. It also means you're never done. So this idea of continuous threat hunting is a contradiction for me. We can get better at threat hunting, and what was threat hunting can be incorporated into your regular detection and response and your continuous monitoring program, but then the bar for what threat hunting is has moved on because you need to assume that that has failed as well. So we can get more efficient at detection and response, we can get more efficient at threat hunting. Threat hunting drives detection and response, but threat hunting is never subsumed by regular detection and response because you need to keep advancing because you need to keep worrying about the threat. You're not done. You need to assume that you failed. Methodology, again, proactive, not reactive. There's a lot of different ways and approaches to do threat hunting, and there's a lot more things that are threat hunting that you might not consider threat hunting. But generally, if you're doing it formally, you're working on some kind of hypothesis. I think this threat is in my environment because, and then you're going to go out and prove it or not. You're doing things like forensic state analysis of your endpoints. You're doing things like baseline analysis and trying to identify anomalies. There's all sorts of different techniques in there, but the point is you start with a question in your head. I wonder if this thing in the news affected me. I wonder if I can find evidence of lateral movement in my environment using this technique. And then you go out and you find out if you can answer that question, and then you adjust accordingly. We use a lot of analogies in cyber, and threat hunting is one of them. In the background that I come from and where threat hunting came from, it does come from this very military, conflict, aggressive, hunter-killer concept. There's really no, I was sending cyber bullets downrange. It's the most, to me, even though it's a little aggressive, it's the most realistic to the fact that we are facing an adversary that is sentient, that wants to do bad to us. So the other analogies fall apart for me, and they have their place, but things like hygiene are a little too much like if we just build our building correctly, it's not going to be affected, right? Like building code, and we just follow these steps and we'll be safe. That's really not how it works when you have a determined adversary. So the hygiene kind of falls apart. Vegetables, we talk about security onion. We talk about defense in depth. That one falls apart too when a lot of organizations have that really hard outer shell and then they're really soft in the middle. And sports, right? Red team, blue team, that kind of thing. All those have their space. But for me, when I think cybersecurity and I put my lens and perspective on things, whether it's incident response, consulting, risk management, whatever we're doing, it's always from a threat hunting perspective because that's why cybersecurity exists. There are threats that want to do us harm. So you can all be threat hunters. Two parts to this, and Sun Tzu really had this, and I didn't want to put the quote, but you got to know yourself and you got to know your enemy. A lot of IT folks are in a great position because they know their environment the best. You've just got to learn about the threat. So I'd really encourage you to learn more about the actual reality of the threats that you're facing, and read not just the first page news reports, but the actual incident reports from the organizations like you that released high quality incident reports. Read the CISA advisories, read the malware reports, understand what it really looked like, and not just the hyperbole of what might be in the news. Read the real technical threat analyses and really see if it applies to you and what you think you can learn from it. Be very familiar with MITRE ATT&CK TTPs. So everybody should be familiar with MITRE ATT&CK at this point. 13 odd years ago, we didn't have MITRE ATT&CK when we were writing that definition of the threat hunting. MITRE ATT&CK came out and we were like, holy moly, this is exactly what we needed, and it clarified our thinking in so many ways. So threat hunting is MITRE ATT&CK is absolutely an important component to organizing how you're thinking about threats and threat hunting. You should also be familiar with David Bianco's pyramid of pain, which is focus on behaviors, not hashes or indicators. So threat hunting is not, at least in its more mature forms, taking IP addresses from a threat intel report and throwing it against your firewall to see if they've been talking to you, right? Those are things that can easily be changed by a bad guy. You're trying to work up that pyramid of pain into tactics, behaviors, and tools, and those are going to be more reliable indicators for your threat hunts. Everybody's already ahead for me, but know your environment, right? What are the threats? What are my public-facing exposures? What telemetry and artifacts do I already have that I'm not using? Where are my gaps? We'll get to those in a second about applying this to IT teams. So like I said, threat hunting really does color my perspective on everything cybersecurity, and I really believe that if we incorporate threat hunting concepts and mindset into our organizations, you will be more secure and better as a result. So threat hunting is not just not just a thing for SOCs, not just a things if you work at a security company. These are things that your IT teams can do. These are things that your SOC can think about and implement, and I have some really big thoughts on that. These are concepts that you can introduce to your users, and also what does it mean as leaders for the organizations that we're trying to protect to facilitate a culture of threat hunting. Cool. So like I said, IT teams are generally the most equipped or knowledgeable or equipped to start threat hunting. The problem is they don't have time and they don't have tools. And I say, phooey. You have time for threat hunting and you might already be doing it. You're in the best position because you know so much about your environment, and if you're just a little bit curious about what might be going on that's weird, you're doing threat hunting. So if you're an admin that set up alerts to be like, I really want to know when a new local admin is in my account, even if you don't have a SOC, you're doing a form of threat hunting. If you've ever landed on, if you've ever looked at VMware and looked at the hypervisor, and you're like, that computer is normally dead as a doorknob. It doesn't do anything. It's a print server or something, and the CPU is at 98%. Something's weird about that machine. Look at it. It might be an IT issue. That's cool. But keep your threat hunting hat on. Because one of my first incidents when I got out of the Air Force was from one of those IT admins. And that's exactly what he did. He said, hey, Andrew, I went to this box. It's normally dead as a doorknob. I went in there to figure out what was causing that CPU spike. Here's a Windows event log. I don't know what it means. What do you think? It was Metasploit sitting on that box, right? That's a threat hunting mindset because he wasn't going to just write it off as an IT issue. He said this might be a threat. So take time, set aside time for threat hunting. When you look at a misconfiguration, when you look at a missing control, if you don't have MFA on your VPN, there are gaps where you know, even if you don't have a full SOC, you can look at what you have and figure out if the bad thing already happened, right? Pull the list of IPs from your VPN, throw them up against a bulk IP reputation database or geo-lookup database or whatever is already in the platform, and look for the weird logons from Russia. You're threat hunting. Spot check systems as you interact with them, I'm going to go through some of those things you can do. So in the Air Force, again, when they threw out the old playbook and they said, throw everything out that you just learned and start with something new, we had in our cube, PowerShell in a month of lunches. That was the book we started with. And we started running all sorts of threat hunts with just PowerShell. We built a whole framework with PowerShell. There's better tools out there, but you have PowerShell. You can interrogate machines. You can understand. You can run netstat across all those machines and get them into a spreadsheet and figure out if there's any weird ports. You can run, enumerate all your local administrator accounts and see if any of them look weird. You can run PowerShell for all sorts of things, create a table, put it in Excel, and use the good old pivot table to identify anomalies for any of those indicators. There's also tools, there's a lot of tools in the sysinternal suite, two that I'll highlight. One is Sysmon. If you don't have Sysmon, Microsoft's sysinternal Sysmon in your environment, you really should. It's free. It's a little driver. It plugs in there, and it adds a whole lot of new telemetry to those Windows event logs. They're a treasure trove for threat hunting questions. You have all the process execution events, the command line, the user, the network connections, the named pipes, the service, everything you need is in those sysinternals, is in that Sysmon data. Get a good config, a good security-minded config. You can find them online, install Sysmon, and you'll be great for threat hunting, and better yet, even if you don't use it, if there's an incident, I'm telling you, when somebody shows up and they're trying to help you and you have all that Sysmon data, you're going to pay a boatload less and a boatload less time because you're not doing that hard forensics waiting for answers that are too late. It's going to be in the Sysmon data. Auto runs, if you're not familiar with sysinternal's auto runs. Persistence, again, learn that MITRE attack TTPs, but the malicious persistence is one of those easiest low-hanging fruit for threat hunting because it means that there's something existing in your environment that you can find. How do you make malware persistent in an environment? It needs to install a service. It needs to put a binary somewhere. There's a lot of places where you can hide or put persistence, right, executables that run after a reboot in Windows. Microsoft auto runs is going to help you do that, download that. They've got a GUI. You can become familiar with what normal looks like in your environment. They've also got a command line version that you can run remotely across all of your environment. And here's a great threat hunt. Look at all the unsigned binaries in your environment that are automatically starting. If you don't find anything, I guarantee you'll find at least like adware, right? And what you've done better than that as an IT team for all of these threat hunts is you're developing a baseline understanding of your environment. So even when you find nothing, you've learned something. And all of that is really good to know before the bad thing happens. Is there supposed to be a lot of data leaving this file server to the internet every day at 2 o'clock in the morning? I don't know. We've never seen that before, but now it's cluttering up the screen when we're looking at this real incident. Is this binary really supposed to be on this web server? I don't know. I've never looked at that web server before, right? So look at those systems, take good notes, learn more about your environment, be curious and suspicious about anything you might see, and those things that you find, even if you find nothing, and you're probably not, you're going to learn a lot so that you know more and you're better for it. For SecOps, I make the assertion that threat hunting is the #1 indicator of a high-performing SOC, a high-performing security operations center. This is such an important concept for me that I report threat hunting metrics to the board, right? They're reported up through me all the way up to the board, and I explain where our threat hunting metrics are. Why? Because a SOC that isn't threat hunting, what are they doing if they're not looking for threats? They don't have enough time. They're inundated in alerts. There's too many false positives. They're not doing the right things. They're just working all these cases, and there's too many meetings, and there's not enough people. So if the threat hunts go down, I know that our SOC is stressed. If our threat hunts are up, I know that we're building new detections. I know that we're asking new questions. I know that we're building new baselines. I know that we're tuning new things and learning new things about our environments that we didn't know before. So I got to keep that balance between regular ops and threat hunting, and how threat hunting feeds all of that regular monitoring. And all of our SOC is set up so that those threat hunters are those analysts. So the result of those threat hunts are, cool, this was hard, this was manual. I'm going to go build a tool, build a detection, build an automation that's going to get that into regular ops and move on. And now 3 weeks later, even if we didn't find anything from that threat hunt, bam, that triggers, we find it, right? As part of regular operations, that threat hunt claims the win, right? Because even though we were done with the manual piece, the automation lived on. And that's how the SOC continues to improve. And that's how I want every SOC to operate. So a lot of you, if you don't have SOCs, I would encourage you, if you're outsourcing your security operations to somebody else, challenge them, really do ask about the role of threat hunting. You're going to get a good idea for the flavor of how that team works. Are they just taking detections and alerts from somebody in somewhere, triaging them in odd, or arbitrary way and throwing you the things that look interesting? Or is there an actual methodology to how they're approaching security operations that's driven by threat hunting? So if threat hunting isn't included, or threat hunting is separate, or threat hunting just doesn't, or some places define threat hunting as, yes, we threat hunt. We ran 60 threat hunts in your environment yesterday. Oh man, I couldn't do that. I don't know what that means. They mean they worked 60 alerts and they decided whether or not there was a threat in that alert. That's not threat hunting, right? These are proactive, hypothesis-driven, analyst gray matter being applied to say, I'm concerned about this technique I just learned about, this technique that was just released, this report that just came out about this threat actor, this thing in the news, and I've got hypotheses and I'm going to go see if there's bad guys. So how could threat hunting be applied to your users? I think we do a poor job in cybersecurity, including empowering users to go up against the threats. A lot of the times what we're doing are sending phishing simulation emails and then punishing anybody who clicks the link. What are you creating? You're creating fear. You're creating this sense of disempowerment. You're creating punishment. Everybody just wants to do their job, and now they're dealing with these phishing emails. And that's the only feedback that they've gotten, is if I didn't do my cybersecurity training or I clicked the email, you messed up, and now you got to fix it. Flip the switch and turn your users into threat hunters. Some people have those users in their organization that get excited when they report a malicious email and they get it right, right? Encourage that. You've got to flip the switch on these things. And I'm talking about email because this is where a lot of our users are going to be involved in facing and seeing threats, especially as a first line of defense. But reward those users. Imagine an email sent to a user that says, hey, thanks for reporting this malicious email. It did get through all of our detections. We've tuned the detections to stop this from happening to anybody else going forward. And by the way, that same email, or at least those behaviors in that email, was sent to 6 other users. And you reported it first, and you reported it before anybody else could get affected, right? Thank you for protecting our organization. Encourage them to understand those threats. Put them in perspective. Let them understand what they prevented. This was going for wire fraud, right? This is what the next thing was going to look like. They would have learned our credentials, and they could have logged in and spread ransomware. I'm not saying you need to scare them, but I need to claim the win with them, right? Let them understand why you're making them go through that exercise, and have everybody stoked when they get that same dopamine I got 13 years ago from smacking a bad guy in the face, right? So if we could get our users thinking about and understanding those threats, that's what you've got to encourage. Don't disempower them. Don't discourage them. Don't just punch the guys that click the email. Train them up. Have them understand the threats. Have them as stoked to protect the organization as you are, and your users are going to be much the better for it. So, leaders, threat hunting and leadership. How do we cultivate this threat hunting culture in our organizations? I don't run into it as much, but I think it's selection bias, because of the audiences I'm talking to. But there are organizations whose leaders would sort of refuse the premise of threat hunting from the start because they don't want you to kick up any sand and dirt that doesn't need to be kicked up. Why are we going to presume that something's wrong? Nothing is wrong, and if you find something is wrong, we're going to have all this work to do, and nothing is wrong. And they want to stick their head in the sand and not support efforts that might help reveal that something is wrong. If that's a leader in an organization, you've either got to get them out, you've got to change their mindset, or if it's you, you've got to change your mindset. Instead, our leaders need to be curious and accurately guided toward not the hyperbolic threats on the news, but the actual realistic threats that are most likely to be affected and affecting our organizations. And a good leader is going to take that threat-centric mindset and spread it throughout the organization. They're going to ask good questions about, hey guys, the city of whoever was affected by ransomware, let me know what we learned from it. Let me know what similarities we share. Let me know what we need to know about the threat actor. What gaps do we have? And they're going to ask hard questions, but ask the hard questions. How and when could we be affected? And what can we learn about this? Let's take that report and turn it into a tabletop exercise, right? Let's pretend that that incident we just read about is actually our organization, and let's talk about it through together. How would we have responded? What would we have detected? What would we have not detected? Who would have detected it? Would we be in the same spot as that other place, or would we be in a different spot? So facilitating that from a leadership level is really where it all starts. Supporting threat hunting efforts. Undoubtedly, when you start threat hunting at a lower level, and this is what happened to me, this is how I became the CTO of Recon InfoSec, you keep building the machine more and more and more and more and more and more and more, and you want more and more and more to find more and more bad guys. So you start with a couple PowerShell scripts and a USB drive, run into every machine and trying to find threats, and before you know it, you've got a SOC. And this continuous improvement in an organization is what's going to get you to where you want to be, right? Challenge technology decisions. Hey guys, why are we buying this product? What threat is it actually relative against? Would it actually detect that threat? Can we simulate that threat and see if this technology is better than that technology? Put it in perspective. Don't just do the checkboxes of features, but genuinely think about what are you trying to stop, and is this really the next best thing I need to worry about? That's what that threat-centric mindset is going to be, and that leader, even if they're not the one on the keyboard finding the threats, I'm taking every victory I can from everything happening under me for all the threat hunting and all the spots, because what are we doing? We're just claiming those heads and putting bad guys up on a stage and saying, look at all the ones I found, right? So that leverage at a leadership level, get stoked about that, and then build your team, build your technology, build your processes around that. Hire, train, empower threat hunters, that's number one. Also, incident responders are really good at threat hunting because they have so much experience to tell you what is real and what is just hyperbole. So somebody who's been through a lot of fires, right, is going to be able to see through a lot of that nonsense real quick when they're like, hey guys, I've seen a lot of fires. This house is made of hay and full of smokers. I think we got to worry about the hay and smokers before we worry about the steel door, right? Cool. So key takeaways, everyone can threat hunt. Every organization can threat hunt. Make time for threat hunting. If you're continuously threat hunting, that's not threat hunting. Keep threat hunting. Cultivating this in your organization, driving improvements and priorities. It is key to my passion for cybersecurity and affects everything I think about how we approach the problems that we have for finding and stopping bad guys. If you want to keep talking about this, every single Thursday, including today, which I missed, we host a webinar called Thursday Defensive. It's not a sales talk, I promise you. These are security practitioners. We just host a guest talking about a topic that they're passionate about. So we've talked about AI and threat hunting. We have 2 years of guests. We had big names. We've had the hidden heroes and the unsung heroes of a lot of the projects and open source tools that you depend on. In a few weeks, we're having Doug Burks from the Security Onion project, the founder of Security Onion, come on and talk about some of the new features. So do join us for Thursday Defensive every single Thursday, 12:30 Central, live. It's just a chat. It's not a podcast. It's not recorded. It's a discussion. You'll see me there. Recon is also hiring. So we've got analyst positions open. We've got an engineering position open. And we're always looking for anybody who wants to talk to us at anything else, and our booth is somewhere over there. So, questions, thoughts? Probably not going to be able to do this from here with the time we have, but I would be really excited and stoked if while I'm up there somewhere, people pull me aside, because that's how I judge how well I did, is if anybody wants to ask me good questions. So, really appreciate it if you want to talk to me, and thanks everyone.